Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion. Any questions you may have around media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we'll be talking about Keynote, answering questions, brainstorming, playing around with it. It's not really a seminar on Keynote. It's more of us talking about it and showing some examples of how we use it. And then the third hour today is educators come in. We don't put that on YouTube. So the third hour at 9 o'clock, we'll have the educators come in and talk about school, talk about those processes. So stay tuned for that. It's both technological and philosophical, kind of ranges all over the place. So anyway, so you should, if you're into education, you should definitely check it out. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. And Mark, what do we have?
From Douglas Carmichael, with most Macs producing a 3840 by 2160 video signal by default, would there be any way to force the Mac to also produce a 1080p by a 1080p 60 signal solely to feed an HD-only Blackmagic design device like an ATEM Mini or a Constellation HD properly? Would I need SwitchResX?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, I believe that a Mac, anything you plug into it, it'll default to whatever it can do. So I think you're best if you want to use the HDMI output. Otherwise, you're looking at a third-party box that will go on one of the Thunderbolts that will probably do 1080 just fine.
You go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, you might have a problem I didn't even know I had. I plug my Mac right into my ATEM, and it does 1080 60, no problem.
Yep, same thing. Next question.
Again, from Douglas Carmichael. I just received... Oh, I'm sorry. Has anyone experienced using AWS Budget Actions, and how effective are they in keeping AWS spending within a specific limit?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I haven't done so much with the actions, but some with the alerting. And I think really the actions are good as an absolute fail-safe, to shut something down or to scale something back. But really, if you can work with your reporting and your just alerting and work on the discipline of keeping things under control, that's by far the first and second step. And, final action should be an absolute fail-safe.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than having something actual. If you're testing it, I think a final action might make sense. If you are doing anything that matters, you don't want to have that something automatically turn off. Next question.
From Joaquin Matus, I just received an AWS Elemental HD Encoder. I am trying to add the link to a MediaLive channel that has a multiplex output. The link is a single pipeline input, but a multiplex requires a standard pipeline input. Can I get around this?
I don't know if you can get around it easily. I think that you may end up taking a single link and then connecting it, like doubling it up and sending it to two more inputs, in another format. So you may decide to take that single link, duplicate it, and send it to two ingest points that are now considered a standard input. I don't know of any other better way to do that. What the multiplex basically allows you to have up to, I believe, 20 programs in one stream. This is a multi-program stream. And I don't know, when things require that you usually have to do some kind of gymnastics internally to take the input that you have and then create two outputs and then put them into two inputs and then put it out there. But I think that's what you'd have to do there. Next question.
From Mark Giuliani in Washington, D.C., I am trying to create an onboarding tool for new employees. Has anyone found a way to show the schema of a network filing system? We are using Google Shared Drives. In Windows, I would use the command tool to capture the data output using dir/s.
Mark, can you elaborate a little bit on what you're trying to do there?
So we're onboarding new employees, and we're trying to show them where all the different folders and files would be in the operating system. And using Google Shared Drives, I'm not quite sure the best way to kind of have a diagram showing what's in each folder and then the subfolders and so on and so forth.
Right. Go ahead, Rupert.
If you have a workflow or tool that you're happy with doing in Windows, like you've described, I would map the drives using there's some tools to do that onto your Google storage onto your local machine, and then use those same tools and replicate the process.
Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, what is the secret in the classic 1980s rock drum sound as shown in the classic From Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
He has a link there.
Yeah, a lot of the drum sounds from the 80s had a short ring out on them, and it just made them super loud. Phil Collins was very popular for using the RMX-16, which has a short decay reverse reverb setting on it. It's made by a company called AMS, Advanced Music Systems, and it may have been used on that particular recording, but it was a very classic sound that you're used to hearing in the 80s. So there you go.
It's funny how those things just become styles. You know, that you have that there's a certain way that everyone decided to record things for a while, and usually that's related to some kind of limitation that somebody had somewhere, and they kind of made it work. It would be interesting to kind of dig into exactly what the approach was, but we have to find a record. We have the resources, I think, to try to dig up someone who was recording those drums in a studio back then and see if we can't find it. I think that, we'll see if we can get someone from like Village Studios in LA to jump on for a second hour. That'd be a lot of fun. They've got a Neve. That's all I got to say. A Neve. Next question.
From Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware, Ray-Ban has introduced smart glasses that can capture video and audio. It features a dual 5-megapixel camera and touch control. Unless you know what to look for, they are completely unobtrusive. Wave of the future?
Go ahead, Mitchell. You want to state your case?
Oh, my case is they're cool-looking Ray-Ban Wayfarers. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to put the graphic up, but the camera sensors on either side, so it kind of leads me to believe there's some kind of a stereo imaging that's going on there. Mm-hmm. But they look just like regular Ray-Ban glasses, so I guess you could walk into a room and videotape everything going on, or tape everything that's going on. I guess the consequences of that are unobtrusive video being taken when you don't know it. That's kind of like the issue. Do you feel comfortable with that?
Well, I guess the question is that's been happening for a long time. Go ahead, John.
Super negative on this, just like Google Glass, people wearing them into the gym and in the bathrooms. I believe Apple's stance on this is they were going to use LiDAR instead of real cameras on their upcoming goggles with glasses. So I'm super negative on glass, hidden, cameras on glasses.
Yeah, I think that number one is hidden cameras on glasses have been around for a long time. So if someone actually wants to do it, they can do it. It may be not as quite as convenient as these ones, but they were like built-in recorders, memory state recorders in the things. I think if you do any search for them, you'll find them. There's also buttons that you can use. There's other small cameras that can be relatively easily handled. Back about when did this release? A lot of the intelligence cameras got basically released from classified, I think in 1999 or 2000, and that's when this all exploded. Because all these cameras were designed for intelligence, and then they just kept going. And then they built their own business and their own little bit of stuff. So, what I will say is, I think that it's problematic in a public space. As a training tool, it's unbelievable. Like the Google Glass was the best POV training I've ever had, because I could just sit there and look at something and hit record and just say, Google record. I can't remember what the thing was, but hey, Google record or whatever, and then just start showing how to do something. And the big thing that Google had was being able to see it. Like I could see what I was actually shooting, and it was awesome. And that's the only reason I want to use it, is not so much for. And well, the other thing I will say is that there were times when I had Google Glass where I was doing something with my kids, and I was like, I really want to remember this moment, and I was able to capture that moment from my POV, which was pretty cool. Go ahead, Nigel.
So I think you have to come to the assumption that if you leave your house, you are being filmed. And if you don't want to be filmed, don't leave your house. And depending where you are in the world, that's probably even more true. What I think will be interesting, and I don't know whether this is a second or third generational way, and what I'm looking forward to is that the camera in my sunglasses is not about recording things, but analyzing and sending me heads up view, particularly who the person is coming towards me saying hello that I have no idea who it is.
Yeah, I do see a future where it goes, that's Frank. He's got 2 kids. You went to dinner with him over, there's like all this, like it goes, how are the kids and how's Marcia? Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I agree. My last two pair of eyeglasses have been Ray-Bans, and I'm looking forward to checking this out. It's very interesting.
Yeah, maybe it's a secret to just getting us all into the metaverse by making the real world not feel safe anymore. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I guess the question also might be, would you talk to somebody differently knowing you were being videotaped and this is recorded as a recording record of that conversation? I know I would speak completely differently to them. I'd be very careful.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how much different I would speak when I'm being recorded, because I kind of always assume that I am. Like, it's not I mean, I definitely speak freely now and again, but in the house. But when I get out of the house, I pretty much assume that someone could hear me say whatever I'm going to say. But that's kind of my approach to it. Next question.
From Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. What do you use for your Stream Deck for?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So I have actually I have three Stream Decks, small, a medium, and large. My small one is in my travel pack, and I take that when I go away and do presentations or stuff, and I find that very useful. The medium one is attached to my main M1 Mac, which I use for Zoom. And I have to tell you, mostly what that is used for is kicking off apps. So I have the range of apps I use every day, and it's just the fastest way to launch, my sequence in the morning. I have a large Stream Deck, which is attached to my studio, which I use David Joshua Ford's system for controlling everything I do on the ATEM. And so I sort of have one at each hand, depending what I'm doing. And I found that rather than trying to consolidate all into one, which just was physically too hard to use, that I've separated them out.
Rupert?
I have been experimenting with the muting Zoom using my Stream Deck, and other than that, I just use it for simple source selecting for the line upgrade and then just fading away.
Tony?
I'm not maximizing the use of my Stream Deck at all. I'm doing it primarily to turn my camera on and off, and I have a clock, and I'm looking at my Mac Mini's resources, and I see how much I'm using it. But I want to say thank you to Dennis Champion Walker, who helped me set up my Stream Deck. And I know that I'm not maximizing the use of it.
Mitchell?
I love using Mix Effects Pro, Adam Tao's program, to control the ATEM Extreme I have. And I put it on my 32-button Stream Deck, and I use it for nothing else except that, because you can control everything, all 72 keys or 72 settings, the super sources, the audio settings. You can even change the EQ if you want to. It's a wonderful thing, and it's all right there in front of you instead of the very warm Extreme with the bright lights on it. The Stream Deck just seems very nice, and the next iteration of Mix Effects Pro is going to provide feedback, which will be wonderful.
Let's go to the next question.
Okay, the next question is from Simon Ray in Shrewsbury, United Kingdom. How do you approach naming a new venture or product to minimize the risk of getting a lawsuit later from someone with pre-existing claim on the name?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So I think the first assumption is that if you can think of a good name, somebody else owns it. So you've got to pretty much go into the thought that every Greek god, every Roman empire, everything that you can generally think of that you think is snazzy is gone. So what I tend to do is take a step back and say, don't confuse what you name something, which may be a legal requirement and will be a legal thing, with what you may call it day-to-day in interactive conversations with each other. So naming is a legal thing, and the best thing is if you use your name or your company's name as the preface to the thing, Zoom Rooms type of thing, then you find you will generally be covered. Then you can just call it whatever you want interactively between people, although in any official document, you should always make sure you use the official name first time. Your question is, can you protect that name? And the protection of that name is generally done by the segment of the industry you're in and the country you're in. And that's when it becomes a very expensive thing. So my best advice to people who are trying to name things is write a sentence about what it is, and then slowly take words out until you get to a very simple description of what it does. If you can think of a cracking name that no one else has done, well done, but protecting it will be expensive.
Go ahead, John.
The gentleman from Austin did a very good job articulating that. We've done this. It depends on where you're doing, which country you're doing business in. In the United States, we use TESS, which is the USPTO office, their electronic search system, and then your domain. So you got to find a domain, and then what we start with is TESS to go out and do trademark search on the names in the U.S. And then you have to protect it country by country. It's expensive. I've done it.
And go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with the gentleman from Las Vegas. It's interesting. If you're coming up with a name and you think it's a great one, check the domains to make sure that you could get it also, because that's the next best place as a place card for the name of your business. I can't tell you. I came up with a name for my company back in the early 90s. It's called Secret Agency. I also registered the domain, and every week I get somebody saying, hey, I just thought of this great name for my advertising agency. Would you mind selling it? And I say, no, I'm using it. Can I keep it? And they get upset. They're literally upset that you did something before them. And then they think the next step, if you don't give it up, is they threaten you with a lawsuit or some other thing. It's amazing. You have to protect yourself. If you don't, they're going to take it from you.
How much did they offer you? That's the question.
I'd
be immediately like, how much?
Here's what I do. I go like this. I say, look, if they say they want to buy it, I say, you can give me one offer and one offer only, and I'll say yes or no. But I will not haggle or negotiate with you. So make sure that the one offer you give me is a good one.
I'd haggle. Like, unless... Yeah.
And invariably they'll say
I would definitely
$500. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've had it for 10 years, and I paid more than that for domain fees.
Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
So the only thing I wanted to add to the previous good advice from everybody was there is some benefit if you've been using a name. If you have, so I have a website that I use for some mentoring stuff, and people keep trying to go, well, actually, I'd like to use that name, but I have prior art, I have prior usage. Yeah. So you are protected if you've been doing something. Well, you can't have someone come in and bully on top of you and take your name away because they're willing to spend $1 million or $1 billion that you're not, as long as you've got prior art.
Mitchell?
Yeah, Nigel's exactly right. You need to show previous usage. And again, to answer Alex's question, when the guy says, well, I've been using that name for, and I say, how long? And they say 2 years. And I said, wrong. I've been doing it for 15 or 20.
unless they're Apple, where they just I'm going to use this name and we'll figure it out later. Next question.
Next question is from Roscoe Jones here on the panel. What are your thoughts on understudies or backup people for large events? How should they be prepared if they are on deck?
I guess understudies in a play perspective is much different than I think with corporate. If that person doesn't show up, we don't put anybody else in it. We program around it because there's no way for somebody else to do what they were doing. Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, sometimes the events are so large so that people have been scheduled. That things are all. This is coming out of personal experience. We've canceled the play the last 2 nights because we didn't have an understudy.
Right.
But I was thinking about it. How do you deal with that? Because sometimes events are so large. I mean, we had the audience seated on Thursday night, ready to go. And then the department chair had to walk out and say, I'm very sorry. We are canceling tonight's show. And that was just.
Was it a COVID or was it something else?
I don't actually know, but she was taken to ER. So I think it's just an incident of some sort.
Right. A lot of times, this is why you have multiple hosts. You have multiple folks that are, so if someone's going to be giving a specific kind of content and they don't show up, I mean, usually we just skip it, but we also oftentimes have multiple MCs, multiple panelists, so if someone isn't able to make it, someone else is there anyway. So I guess I don't think of it as an understudy, but I do think of it as you have multiple people with the same responsibility that we will hand off to. If they, will just carry more weight than they were otherwise. I think that's how we kind of.
And you give them you give them the same prep as you do the first line person, or they all get an equal amount of prep?
They're all rehearsing together. I mean, like a lot of times when we're doing these kinds of things, they're all going back and forth. They're all being part of it. What I try to avoid is teleprompters. So they don't have to read the other person's piece. I try to keep it as, we definitely have teleprompters in what we do, but a lot of times what we try to do is minimize the use of them, because I just find that it feels like an older kind of content that I'm not trying to do. So usually I just want it to be like, here are your notes, and talk about it. And it might be a little bit rocky when they're talking about what the other person was going to talk about, but a lot of times they were going back and forth and it was almost interchangeable, much in the way that, our show, if a couple people show up or don't show up, our show kind of just keeps chugging along, So I think I think building that out makes a big difference. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I would think that's a big commitment in time for somebody to supervise an understudy, because they have to know everything that the main talent understands, and you would have to manage that. So I'm not sure I could commit to that.
It's like being an alternate juror. That's like the worst. Yeah. Sit there and I was almost an alternate juror, and I said, I don't think you should put me on the case. And they were like, why? And I said, because I'm super interested in chain of custody. And the prosecutor was like, we need to cut him, judge. like it was like, that's all I got to say.
I did that once, and the judge said, do you understand the term, what is the term that they would throw you in jail?
I'm not.
I forget it. I'm out of my head.
I'm telling the truth.
Contempt.
So I'm super interested. I'm super interested in chain of custody. Like that is the thing that I come from a family of lawyers. That's how you unravel everything.
Yeah, me, and Mr. Smartmouth said what he did, and contempt of court was thank you.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so I've done a couple of fairly significant product announcements that were strategically important to the company I was in and would move the share price type of announcements. So when we do that, we have backups for everything. We have backup speakers, we have backup, just the implication on the share price is so significant that you wouldn't make that wrong. I will tell you the most expensive backup I ever did was send a private jet for the speaker. And we flew him from California, just Northern California down to Palm Desert. But it was long enough that if he didn't get on the plane on a certain amount of time, we knew we had a backup plan we needed.
Right. Yeah. One of the things we do worry about a lot is people showing up late, especially for virtual events, because you don't have them in place. So a lot of times we ask them to show up an hour and a half, like just jump online for an hour and a half ahead of time and just say hi. So our standard procedure for high profile events is 3 hours ahead of time. We're going to text you and say, hey, how you doing? We just want to remind you you're still doing this thing. And we just kind of check in, and then an hour and a half ahead of time, we want them to just kind of come in and just, wave, and we'll make sure that everything's working okay. And then usually we bring them in about a half an hour before to stay online until we go live. Next question.
From Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas, here on the panel with us this morning. Can anyone recommend a 5/8 ball head swivel adapter for microphone mounts? Equivalents for quarter 20 seem to be ubiquitous, but 5/8 versions look less attractive. I'd like to avoid lots of thread adapters.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Just give some extra context here. I'm sure we've all got tons of these things just laying around for little bits and pieces, but I want the equivalent to, mount one of these mic adapters, something like this, but for a mic 5/8 thread. And I've seen some online, but none that really look like they really stand up for the job. So I'm looking for a recommendation.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, if I get a surprise, I use a super clamp, and there's a mini version of it that'll get you into the ball game, because you don't always have the threads to be able to work with. So as long as you can clamp it onto something, you're good. But it doesn't look pretty.
Yeah, you can. There's the little threaded ones that'll upgrade the 3/8, the quarter to 3/8, but those will strip if you as you know, if you've tightened them too much, they'll just strip right out into the system. So what you can do is have one that I don't think I have one within reach. I usually have a lot of these adapters. It is it looks like it's usually brass, I think, and it's got a receiver that is quarter 20. And then it's got above it, it has a 3/8. So it's not adapting it. It's actually in between it. And you screw it onto one. And it's much more robust than converting that little piece to it. So I would take a look at that to make that conversion from one to the other. If that's, I don't know if I don't know about ball heads that are.
The other challenge I found is, the tension when you want to actually cinch it up is that if you've got a mic arrangement on it, it just doesn't quite have the kind of tension that it needs to resist the leverage,
It's the rubber. So if you cut a little piece of rubber or put a little piece of tape there, and then you like electrical tape will work really well, and you just need to tighten it. You just need something other than metal against metal. So if you just put a little electrical tape on it, I just will pin a hole in it and just push it right down over top of it, and then just cut it around there. Just that little add will make a huge difference in how much it wants to slide. You just have some little friction in there. Next question.
From Rupert McRae again. What buttons do you use on your ATEM every day, other than the key source keys?
Nigel?
So I don't press any buttons on my ATEM. I use my Stream Deck to do all of it. The two most common things I do are changing what's the output, because I use a teleprompt and it's one of the outputs, so I can always spot around. Or if I'm doing a presentation at work, I can quickly do that using a super source. But mostly I do those two things through the Stream Deck.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the one I'm guaranteed to use every day is this one to get my lower Fenwick. So
Very good.
that's
Yeah,
the key is guaranteed.
I think I use the my MP1 a lot because I do this fade thing in and out, and so that I need to have that's loaded up. So I know if I hit just MP1, I know that's what I'll fade in and out of. And then I use the video outs a lot. So I have a screen up here, and if someone's showing something that I want to see, if you ever see me looking like this, it's because the output for one of my HDMIs, I sit there and I can cut to a specific source and see it full screen, or I can go back to multi-view or program. So I think those are probably the buttons that I use the most. I definitely don't use many of the buttons, and I really wish most of them weren't there. Like transitions, it's really great that they have all these transitions, except I never use them like that. I don't know why you would ever do that, because most of them you should never use. So we have buttons in here that we should never use. And so I think that there was a little bit of a spray and pray kind of thing with the buttons. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, right now to me, the ATEM Mini ISO is just a dongle for recording MP4s off of a Blackmagic 6K. So really the record button, right. I can say. It's but very good. And I have a question coming up. I'll talk about whether or not that dongle should be in the theater space or hidden somewhere else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
From Joey Kidd in the Bay Area of California on networking. Is the UniFi DreamMachine Pro, UDM-Pro, today worth skipping in favor of the UniFi Next-generatin Gateway Pro, UXG-Pro-US, with a Cloud Key Gen2 Plus, UCK-G2 Plus, or Cloud Console? My goals are security, stability, and throughput.
Rupert?
I'm just going to add to give a couple opinions on Ubiquity stuff in general, which you might want to keep in mind. Last year, I think it was, Ubiquity announced the deprecation of a lot of the older UniFi equipment, saying that they weren't going to receive security updates, and they're going to be retired out. So, just looking at Ubiquity stuff in general, or anything really, but particularly Ubiquity, because you have to appreciate that the cost is being met by people buying new products rather than subscription. So you just want to look at the roadmap of how long the hardware you're buying into is going to be supported. If it's an older device, then it may just have a shorter roadmap into the future. And then from cloud perspective, just from my personal opinion, I've tended to host my Ubiquity controllers on site rather than in the cloud, and you can interpret that whatever way you want.
And next question.
From Roscoe Jones. Has anyone had a fire code inspection on a trade show booth?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I have had that happen. Most recently, I was doing a trade show downstate, and I had a area Alexa build with all the wires and stuff and everything on it. And the fire inspector wanted me to explain why the camera looked unbuilt. So I said, in actual fact, it is built up, and it's got all this extra stuff hanging on it. He said, well, is that a problem? I said, absolutely not. That's the way that we do things. So explaining something natural to your business to the uninitiated is complicated.
Nigel?
We built a 2-story house in one of the entrances to CES one year, and did it between the company I was working at and Wired to get sort of lifetime experiences. Let me tell you, that was inspected by everybody multiple times because it was in the main flow of traffic, and that's when they particularly become sensitive, not only to fire and the other things, but how secure is everything, and what happens if there's a whole bunch of people that start to run out? What's that thing going to do?
Yeah, where we've seen the inspections go way up is anytime you build 2 stories at a trade show. So 1 story, they seem to have almost no interest in them. That's just what they have there. And, if they're standing, that's probably fine. I have seen them walk through and just look at booths, and then they'll dig into one that doesn't look very good. Most of those booths are so expensive that if you're in a 20 by 20, you had somebody work it out. Like, it's not, there's a lot of engineering. I think that they just kind of pass over them. They can't get to everything. But for little booths, a little 10 by 10 that's creatively built, it looks like somebody thought through it and they figured they could do it at home. It has appeared that they get more attention. There's definitely people wandering around kind of shaking on the things and looking at it and trying to figure out if it's going to stand up. I've never seen anybody do anything about it, but I've definitely seen that the inspectors there looking a little bit more closely at ones that look like they're homemade as opposed to ones that, as soon as you put truss up, they just go, oh, well, they have what they need. It's really hard to, it's hard to screw truss up, so it's the physics. Next question.
Roscoe Jones is back. We can dim ATEM Minis, but what if we need to turn the buttons off? Black wrap or cloth? Other ideas?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'd be concerned about how you're going to tell the status of the button if it doesn't light up. I think on the extreme, you can almost turn it all the way off. There's a lowest setting, but it's been a while since I've done that.
It's still pretty bright. Go ahead, Roscoe.
It is.
Yeah, what this is in the theater space, and I put a link into a wall mount that we use to mount the 6 case to the wall. And if I just wanted the dongle to be in that room, I needed some way to encase. I was thinking a small box, or I'm trying to figure out how to encase an ATEM Mini. I'm a little worried about the heat and that kind of stuff, but really all I have to do is run an Ethernet to it to hit the record and start it and everything in that smaller containment.
I would probably get a dark smoky plexiglass and then cut it, and just something that would just hang on top of it. That you probably could get something that wouldn't, if you put Velcro across the top of your ATEM Mini and then the matching Velcro on it, and you could just set it there, a couple little tabs, and you could just set something over top of the front of it that just went down. You could print something, you get some plexi. And just I would get dark plexi so I could see a little bit of that. But if it's something that the audience is actually going to see, then you can make it black. But some plexi, some Loctite, and a hacksaw would probably be enough to get, and some strips of I think would probably get you a nice little whatever.
Yeah, we do have plexiglass, so that is a good idea.
We use a lot. There's a Tap Plastics about a mile from our office, and we've made lots of trips there. So it's a fun little thing to put together. Next question.
From James Foslin in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've seen fiber being put in the neighborhood and smaller Wi-Fi poles every few blocks, but no one seems to be offering home internet with this. How do I find who could offer this?
Rupert?
I actually went through this when I got fiber here. A few months prior, I had seen the activity, guys working on the street and putting it in and what have you. Quite often those subcontractors are unmarked. It's not necessarily obvious who they are working for, but you can take the approach, just go up and ask them, hey, whose fiber is this? And ask them. If that's not practical, you can also go to your local municipality and see who's pulled the permits to work in the area. That will, in the underlying paperwork, that will generally tell you who's at play. The Wi-Fi stuff you're seeing, it may be Wi-Fi. It may also be something to do with 5G these days. With all, who knows? But radio equipment in neighborhoods can also be connected to things like antennas for smart metering and things like that. So it's not always about internet.
A Wi-Fi pole every couple hundred feet is most likely 5G. That's what it takes to get 5G coverage, and it being laid out could be years before it actually gets lit up. And they'll do it as fast as they can, but it could be 3 months, 6 months, a year before they actually make it active, because they still have to validate it, test it, load balance it. There's a whole bunch of things that have to happen once those antennas go up. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the antennas usually are connected to the fiber in some way, some type of device at a pole. And I agree with Rupert. Go up and ask the guys to say, hey, what's going on here? Who's this for? It's usually a cable company that's doing that kind of connectivity in a neighborhood, but it could be a 5G thing going on. You're right.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at how much, just being a good conversationalist, how much information you can get from anybody who works outside of our house. I tend to walk out and do kind of the aw shucks country boy thing, and I get a lot of information out of exactly what they're doing. So it's so just being kind of laid back and having a conversation, asking them how their day is, and start with small talk, and then you can slowly ratchet it up and gather a lot of information pretty quickly. Next question.
From Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Budget RTMP to HDMI solution for streaming drone footage to an ATEM. Blackmagic Design Streaming Bridge comes into mind, but would be at the upper budget limit. If a dedicated computer is used, what would be required?
Go ahead, John.
I'm having trouble understanding his workflow here. What we did at the rocket launch was we had the Mavic with the smart controller that has HDMI, and we fed that feed into the ATEM, and then from there you can stream directly out. But I'm not sure what he's trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, my guess is that the drone is not anywhere near the ATEM, so there's a need to take an HDMI footage of let's just say you're doing footage in. The question is like, how do we take footage from what you're doing in Vegas and putting it into my ATEM here, and what would that take to stream it? There is I don't know if that's public yet. There's some things that could possibly be done through AWS, but I have to figure out where it is in the pipeline. But what you're looking for is a gateway that will let you output video from the cloud. And that's, I don't know if it would be more expensive or less expensive than the bridge, because you'd have a computer there to do that. But it would be really cool. But I think that there's anything that's going to that's going to pop video out. I mean, it could even be like a B-Link could do that. Like a B-Link could receive a stream, be full string by Courtney. I'm missing Courtney today, but we'll still give him his credit. But a B-Link could do it, like a little PC. Oh, you know what? Another thing that you could do is probably stream it to a page with a Chrome, one of those little Chromecasts. Just put it in the back of your, or something on an Apple TV. So all of those could be potential ideas for that. Next question.
Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia, here on the panel with us this morning. What are the panels pre-check before joining the office hours panel?
Nigel.
So let's assume everything is turned on. So all the hardware devices on. I have a series of buttons on my Stream Deck, which I go through. I first turn the Elgato lights on with that button. I get QuickTime up to see what's coming out of the camera. I then press Bluetooth Plus to make sure I've got the aperture completely open, as much light. I then hit ATEM software. While ATEM software is coming up, I hit my Nobiscope so I can actually do the color balance. And then I jump on Zoom.
Go ahead, Tony.
My setup for checking everything is if everything is on, I turn everything off or restart everything. I turn on my GVM lights, and then I check for my audio. That's my check. And I do
Mitchell.
that every day.
Right. Mitchell?
I usually check it the night before. I mean, after I'm on after hours, it's probably the last thing I do. So everything's like ready to go and checked out. So when I take my little nap for 6 hours, come back in, everything is in its proper place. But like everybody else, you got to go through, set up your lights, making sure your audio is working, making sure Zoom is happy, your internet is active. You must be ready, because it's a whole lot easier to solve all those problems before you go on than while you're on.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I agree with everything, all the audio checks and stuff. I spend a lot of time rearranging windows because I use this computer for other things. I'm using a single window to view everything. So therefore, I spend a lot of time moving stuff around so that I can see all the indicators I want while the show's going.
Yeah, I have to admit, I almost don't change my space almost at all. I turn off the monitors and the lights, but I don't turn off any core things ever. So, and so and that keeps me from being surprised. I don't like things I like to be able to just sit down and go, and I'm on this maybe 6 to 8 hours a day in some meetings. So it's a pretty known system at this point. Again, I think it's one of the big advantages of being a panelist is the fact that your system really well, and it's working all the time, and it makes it better in meetings. And I really think we keep on talking about this when people aren't very good at meetings. I'm like, well, you just don't have enough practice. So it's a good practice to just keep on tweaking it all. I've been following more. Also, you'll see me constantly changing things. I've been following more of Nigel's thing where I'm constantly playing with my camera. I did that for a little while, and then I stopped. And then Nigel's got so good that I feel like I need to keep working on it. All right. Next question.
From David Brady in New York City, recently picked up an 11-inch iPad Pro, got Effects Pro and PolyCm loaded up. What other apps are some of the panel's favorite M1-powered iOS apps?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So I'm sort of indirectly going to give you a different answer, which is it depends what you use as a keyboard. So I have the Magic Keyboard, which is a very expensive. I know you can get cheaper alternatives. And that changes how I use my iPad dramatically. I mean, I can tell you I play games on it, and I surf the web, and the F1 app is the best way to watch a game, and there's great sound. But if you've got the Magic Keyboard, which has the trackpad on it and a half-decent keyboard, it really can become your work machine. So then Office becomes more useful, or whatever products you use. So my answer is all the apps are great. I don't have any M1 specific that I'm using, but the nature of the keyboard changes how I use the iPad.
You go, Tony.
LumaFusion, Keynote, and also you can find that your iPad can be your daily driver. It is for me. It is the one that I keep with me all the time.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to think of there's a lot of music ones that I play with. There's tons of little music apps. I don't have my iPad here, so I'm not sure which ones I'm that I have in front of me. But it's not. I don't have it here. But the other ones are the Blackmagic control uses. So to control your Blackmagic camera, you can connect via Bluetooth and change most of your settings. Not LUTs, which drives me crazy, but outside of that, most of your settings on your camera wirelessly. So I do like that one. If you have a Blackmagic camera, another one, if you have a Mix Pre, the Wingman is also another one that we use fairly often in that process. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I like the idea that David is working on there because there's an app out that I really would like to use, but only works on the iPad Pro because of the USB connector on it. It's called Monitor Pro. That allows total control over my Sony camera, my FX3. Plus, it gives me a feedback on it. I can see the actual image on it and walk around with it. So that to me sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Next question.
From Joey Kidd, on Verizon's mmWave-capable 5G home internet product in the U.S., does the Verizon Internet Gateway NCQ1338 have the ability to easily operate in bridge mode? Cheers.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
I'm not sure. We had a related question earlier in the week, and I just raised the question whether these 5G home internet services actually give you a live internet IP, or whether you're still getting a typical kind of cell-based private IP and stuff. Because bridge mode would only really be helpful or of use to you if you are getting a live IP and you want to transfer that onto your own router. So I'd be more interested to know whether this service truly gives you a live internet IP.
Yep. Next question.
From Jonas in Karlsruhe, Germany, is there a way to ISO out different Zoom translation feeds from one PC NDI room?
Not yet. That's what I would say. No, I think that there's a lot of interest and a lot of people talking about ISOs and so on and so forth, but I don't think that we can pull the translation feeds out. And I have no idea what the trajectory for translation feeds are, but it's a really good idea. But I don't know of any way to do the translation feeds. They're really a service for the meeting, but I don't know if it'll record them or ISO them out. Next question.
From Michael Marsh, is the screen capture tool that can capture anything in workplace app videos are showing up as black screen?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Video Assist works really well here. You plug the HDMI out from the Mac and you just run it right into a Video Assist. It'll record a nice ProRes of video.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of us have done in the past, is to run it out. Now, there still may be, sometimes there's a DHCP issue, not DHCP, but HDCP, where it won't want to put that video out because it's a copywritten thing. If you go out of it, sometimes there's an anomaly, something isn't working in some of these less expensive Chinese loop throughs that will identify themselves with HDCP and then strip it out and send it out of them. It's a problem for most people, but you might find that useful. Next question.
From Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand, Antelope audio products have got a lot of traction press lately. Anyone here with experience? One of the audio sessions next week, maybe, and there's a link.
So in Antelope Audio, they have a lot of little bits and pieces of it's a really interesting collection of devices. I don't know if we can bring them on next week. That's usually moving a little bit too fast for the weekend because we had to find someone there that's willing to show up. But I think that they make a lot of sense as far as if we can find someone to do that. I think it'd be really interesting. It looks like some cool equipment. Next question.
From Mitchell Hill here on the panel with us, what's your procedure for being ready to unmute your mic on office hours? Do you hover over the button?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So I'm sure Mitch is going to show us the world's best solution for muting and unmuting using as much technology as we can amass. I tend to follow if you have a Mac, buy the bigger keyboard, make F19 the universal mute key on Zoom, and then a micro movement of your hand from the mouse to the edge of your keyboard is the fastest way, because you know where the edge of the keyboard is, you can feel it, and it's the first button you find.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of using the mouse, having the cursor right over the button, and just clicking at the last minute. That way, you also get the immediate visual feedback of the mute icon changing, so you kind of know it's latched on, and it's just the least risky approach. And as well as being ready to unmute, you want to be equally ready to remute once you're finished speaking. I also have my window arrangement such that once I'm ready to click on the mute, it doesn't suddenly snap focus and change my screen. So I just try and have my Zoom controls visible all the time.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I want to thank Nigel for setting me up for this, my answer here. When you're reading on office hours, you need to be looking at the question. You can't be necessarily looking where you're going to unmute the mic. So there's a little bit of complication. But the way I do it is, if you've ever seen that character on Breaking Bad, Mr. Salamanca, he's sort of like this, ready to hit that little bell at any time. So I did that for quite a while, where I had hovered my finger over the button, and after a while, my finger just started getting very sore. So I'm just following the footsteps of Alex. Alex has this exact device, and I'm not sure how he does it. I think that he goes up and hits it from the bottom and pushes up when he needs to unmute, but it's probably in muscle memory and he knows where to go.
Yeah, I was muted. So the what I typically do is I have my finger, and I'll just set my finger right below that button. So I just set it there, because then I can it's just like, instead of holding it, it takes less energy, to be honest with you, to set it there. And then I do push it up from the bottom of the button, because people complain about hearing the button otherwise. So they can hear the click. It's something I want to fix with it. I don't think they thought that through. I mean, I love the Studio Technologies 205. The buttons make too much noise, I really wish they'd build a rubberized version of this. And these are standard buttons, and because they're so back ordered, I've been hesitant to take this one apart, but I have been thinking of taking it apart and putting in rubberized buttons to do the same closure system that they have here. I think it'd be a lot quieter. We'll see. Next question. Oh, sorry, Peter. Tony, I think I skipped you there. Did you have,
I was just going to say I keep my hand on the Stream Deck, and probably 5 or 6 times during this conversation, I was pushing the button on and off so that I'd be ready.
Very good. Well, I love it. It is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine when people have a long break before they unmute. I'm like, you were in the list. There's a list in the back. You knew you were next. All right, next question.
Peter Moore's back. One for Jonas. Can you describe how big Tommen is? For those of us outside of Europe, I got my first delivery from them last Friday. One more coming on Monday.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, I could only do it by Google, and 5,500 square meters is the size of the store, which to me is bigger than a Stuckey's, but probably not as big as B&H, but maybe, I don't know.
It's big. It's big. Next question.
Joaquin Matus from Imperial Valley, California. Alex, with the addition of the Studio Technologies announcer console to your setup, how does the MixPre 3 fit into your pipeline now? Does the MixPre run into the announcer console?
Yeah, so I'm using I am using a Scorpio, which is a much bigger version of the MixPre. I keep on meaning to put a MixPre in there, but the Scorpio's been there for so long, and it has Dante. So the way mine works is that what goes through my Studio Technologies, it goes analog into the Studio Technologies, and actually then goes Dante out of the Studio Technologies into my mixer. And the advantage of that is that by having the mic go straight into that piece, when I have my Dante working, my PoE switch died. The PoE part did. The switch is fine, but it's not powering anymore. So as soon as I get that fixed, I'll have the Studio Technologies and I can talk into comms, because there's 2 buttons here, and I can use Dante and loop back to pass that into comms there. And we had that working with Mickey earlier, and it worked fine. And then I had this little switch problem. And so anyway, and that switch, the Meraki switch, is very back ordered. That's the problem. It's not like, I can just go buy one over the weekend. I have to wait for a while. Anyway, so that's why it goes out of Dante. Now, it also loops through and goes into input 1. So if something went wrong, I could just go to input 1 and I wouldn't have all the cool little tools that I have there to make that work. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I have the same device. That, by the way, the image is not the 205 that Alex and I are both seeing, but it's very similar. The thing that's hard to get your arms around with this 205, and it's new to me, so I'm enamored with the device, is that it's an analog and digital device, because it has an analog output for the microphone. It has a preamp and a phantom power for it. And it has the digital side, which goes into Dante. I'm using the Dante side to do back-end comms through Unity. And the analog side goes into my Effects channel, which Mickey does not like. But at some point, it's become a Studio Technology. My question would be, is there a Studio Technology, a Studio device that, like the MixPre, that works with Dante, or do you have to use devices with it? No, it would be nice to use Dante to route.
You can use Dante to route. So that's that's what the Studio Technologies does. I think I'm
thinking of sound devices is one of the. How do you get it into the sound device? You have to use the
Dante.
analog loop. Yeah,
I'm using Dante because all the 8 series is all Dante.
Oh, okay.
The 8 series is Dante capable. Otherwise, if you wanted to get analog in, you'd probably use an Avio. It is a Ethernet. There you go. See, that's what you would use. It's written on the board right now. JJ put it on the board. A quote from me that says, "You can't have enough audio." We have so many. I think we might have 20 or 30 of them. It's like anytime you want to drop a line somewhere, you just run Ethernet to it, and out comes some audio. And we're using them all over the office. Just so much simpler than sitting there and trying to figure that out. Yeah. Go ahead, Nigel.
I was just going to say I've ordered an Avio USB from Guy, November.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't know. We're using Ethernet ones, and we haven't seemed to have. I mean, they seem to be coming in pretty large volumes. I think we just got another 8 or 10 of them. But yeah, the USB ones might be backed up. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, do you think we're going to see a Constellation 4K replacing the current ATEM 4K line?
Yes. I don't know when, but I feel like there's a gap there. I don't know if the 4ME, I think that the gap is really the 1ME and 2ME 4Ks. I don't think that there's going to be another 4ME. I think the 4ME is the Constellation. But I think that there is a possibility of running a 2ME and a 1ME version of these. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, do you use a Scarhoy at all when you're controlling these constellations?
We have in the past used Scarhoys, but not with the Constellation. We've been with the Constellation. I have one of the newer 2ME panels, so that's what we're using to do that. Which is, I will admit, I work at a facility where there's a 4ME. It's much more convenient. It's just like when you have 4MEs, you don't use the ME3 and 4 as well when you don't have access to it in the hardware. But we have in the past had Scarhoys. It used to be that the Scarhoys were way less expensive than the Blackmagic hardware, and so it was easier to use. Now the price points aren't that much different, and so we tend to lean back towards the Blackmagic.
Yeah, it was the magic little box that allowed the Panasonic PTZ controller to speak to the auxiliary channel and do. It was just, it's like, wow, it just does it and talks right to it. And I didn't know if those were in use all over the place.
Yeah, we've used a lot of Scarhoy stuff, over the past. We kind of, I think, helped them a little bit at the very beginning, getting them some big contracts with Google, but I think that early on they were just like these little devices we could kind of hack and make work, and then they've really grown. I mean, and done amazing things. And their hardware is, I do see their hardware in a lot of different places, especially places that they're solving a form factor that Blackmagic doesn't solve, like a rack mountable switcher, a little switch. You can get these little controllers that sit on the arm of your camera, so that you can sit there and switch between the cameras. If you're like if you're really low, like you're out of people, you can have one of the camera operators be the TD. They have a little monitor sitting, hanging off the camera. That's the show. And they can be sitting there calling the show and doing it and operating one of the cameras. It's not the style of production I do, but it's a cool idea. Next question.
Rupert McRae is back. How, if at all, does a smartwatch help your professional workflow, other than the obvious things like reminders?
Mitchell.
Yeah, sorry to be obtuse on the question answering. I like the Google. I just tell it, I need a reminder, I need this. I've got them in all the rooms, and I don't have to worry about wearing it.
I think the number one thing that I do with mine is timers. I just use, I think that's the reason I keep this watch, is pretty much the timers. like it's I have this much time to that. I have that much time to, but I think if all it did was digital timers, I'd probably still buy it. And I don't use it as much for everything else. My biggest complaint is the watch. I guess you can now people can design their own watch faces, but the thing that, I don't know, I've seen some apps that I've downloaded. I still haven't gotten it to work yet, but my biggest complaint about the watch is that I couldn't have a digital output with seconds. Like it's like nothing had that there. And it just makes me absolutely bonkers. Yeah. Next question.
Graham Cardwell from Belfast, Northern Ireland. We have upgraded our internet in church and now want to upgrade our stream from 720/30 to 1080/60. What steps should we be taking to check sync and signal path? Data video PTC 150 to an ATEM TV Studio 4K, Wirecast, and then YouTube.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, I guess the first question I have is what frame rate, but because that PTZ will do both 25 and 30 or 29.97 actually. So, I mean, you have to kind of determine, it's checking your bandwidth all the way through, because certainly the ATEM TV Studio 4K will pass it just fine. Wirecast is, the pressure on the encoding. I'm sure you have more power, a computer with enough power to do the encoding at 1080p, and so that. Therefore, I think it's just a question of just pushing. I think you're good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the hardware. Is the hardware powerful enough to run Wirecast at 1080p 60? Is that if you have a fast enough computer, which any modern computer should be able to do that, but that would be the only pinch, I think, would be making sure Wirecast can do that. Next question.
Jonas is from Karlsruhe, Germany. Has anyone had problems running multiple Zoom instances on one machine?
Rupert?
I'm going to talk about a Windows perspective, but I think the challenges are the same. I'm not going to say problems so much, just as challenges. There seems to be aware of. If you are in HD meetings, having multiple instances of Zoom running, pulling and pushing HD feeds all over the place, that you can run into a performance issue there, either in system resources or even bandwidth. You just want to watch out for that. If you're using shortcut keys in Zoom and you've got multiple instances of it, you have little to no control over which shortcuts are going to control which instances of Zoom. So you might be fighting things there. Audio can be a problem. Very difficult, again, if not impossible, to route separate instances of Zoom to separate audio devices in and out. So you've got challenges there. And if you're in the same meeting with multiple instances of Zoom on the same machine, which is possible through various kind of hoops and jumps. But if you do get to that point, you want to bear in mind that all your instances may be in the meeting as the same name or have the same role, and you just want to watch out for how those things can either conflict or be the same.
Yeah, Mitchell?
Yeah, it's ironic. Rupert and I were talking about this before we went on the air today. And I have pro accounts with Zoom, and it will not allow you to create a second instance using your same email. You need a different email and a different account to get two up at the same time. Unless, and Rupert, you knew this, you have a business account, then you can get away with it.
Next question.
Next question's from Eddie Scott in Mission Viejo, California. Are you all ready for Mother's Day? Just trying to save you at the last minute.
So be ready. Believe me, we have to do a shoot or a rehearsal tomorrow, and we're trying to fill positions. So we're very clear that it's Mother's Day because everyone tells us that every time we call them and going, hey, are you available on Monday? I think we got it all pretty much done, but it was a thing. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I don't know how my mom knows, but she always can spot it when I use one of those people that stand on the street corner with the bucket and they've got the roses in it and they, oh yes, I got to get something. And I buy one and my mom says, I know where you got that. You got it at 4th and Scott Streets.
Yeah, I will say that figuring out where you're going to get a really good dozen roses is useful, and it's not going to be somewhere easy. Usually. Next question.
Graham Cardwell's back. Alex, I asked earlier in the week about measuring clap test for sync. You said you used Final Cut to see the delay. I'm trying to do the same in Resolve, but how do you get to that sub-frame accuracy? I need an answer in milliseconds.
So what I will say is that in general, you can, I guess the easiest way to think about this is in general, you don't need subframe accuracy for lip sync, and no one's going to see anything under 30 milliseconds. You round up so that the video should be just a little ahead of the audio. And the reason for that is that audio is always behind video in the real world. So when someone talks to you and they're 10 feet away, they're 10 milliseconds. Their audio is 10 milliseconds behind. So our brain is very, very good at managing sync internally as long as the video is just a little ahead of the audio. The reason we notice audio being ahead is because we don't see it in the real world ever, because light is always getting to us before the audio. So that's why everything looks wrong when the audio is ahead of video, and of course electronics create that. You should be able to click and drag if you're trying to get it. The hard part is actually measuring that because usually what I do is I'm trying to sync something up in Resolve, and I'll click and then pull it until it's right on. When you're dragging it, it is actually accurate. I don't know if there's anywhere it reads that, but when you're dragging it, it's subframe. You're moving that at a sample level as you move it along in Resolve and in Final Cut. So you can get it to be very, very accurate. And again, one of the things that you can do is, if you really want to be into it, somewhere at the beginning of the show, when you hit record before maybe even before the audience comes in or whatever, you can literally close a slate. And now all your cameras are going to be, you just point all your cameras at one place, close a slate on it, and they'll all be, you can sync. But if you're trying to sync for live, again, there are so many places that you lose sync that you just trying to be less than 30 milliseconds is attempting precision beyond the accuracy of the system. Because when your encoder may do something, I have a problem right now that I'm trying to solve, which is that my audio is ahead of my video in my AV system, and I'm going to have to put something in the middle of it to fix it. I haven't been able to find any easy way to do that. Apple will do it if you have wireless speakers, but they will not do it. They don't just change the sync inside of the Apple TV, which makes me crazy. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, just make sure you have that magnet turned off, because that'll, snap stuff around. So you just want to, if you want to move stuff granularly, get rid of that magnet.
Oh yeah. Get rid of the snapping. I think on Final Cut it's the N key, but like one of them it's N key. But yeah, snapping is not your friend. Okay. We are now going to change subjects to our discussion about Keynote. We will be, we had so many questions. Now we may find out that you don't have any questions about Keynote today, and then this will be a really short trip, and then we'll just close it off and wait for the educators to come in at 9. So we got one question right now, but we'll, a lot of it is for us to. We had so many questions with Keynote yet last week, and I figured we'd do it again, and we'll do it fairly regularly unless we have, I think we're going to spend some time looking at Keynote pages, etc. While unless we put something else into it. And the reason for that is that I really think from an education perspective, I will still argue that Keynote is one of the most powerful apps that you can use. I don't know if this is, I now have my, I was going to show the coffee cup, sometime next week, but I was thinking that it might be useful here to show, while we're waiting for questions, to show building a model and exporting it and bringing it into Keynote. Would that make, not into Keynote? Well, it would be a little bit of into Keynote. It's a roundabout thing that hopefully we'll cut some steps out of. So let's do this really quickly, and we don't have a lot of questions lining up yet. And so let me hide this here. So I'm going to close. I won't be able to see anything for a little while because I am going to probably do a. I'm going to cut to it, but it'll be. Let's see here. I didn't have it launched up here. Hold on. So I'm going to use. You could definitely use other things. I know how to use Cinema 4D, and not super well. Like I'm not. When I need something really done, I have somebody else do it. But so I'm going to show you kind of a rough, version of me kind of working through it. I'm still also. I don't know if Mitchell has the same problem, but I'm still getting used to the new interface. So I'm committed to not going back. I have a tendency to want to just keep moving forward with whatever. If a company gives me a new interface, I get pretty obsessed with just figuring it out. like this is like there's no reason to keep on going back to the old one. But that means that you may see me a little confused at times when we do this. So now I am going to do this slightly differently than Rick does. But Rick Barrett at Cinema 4D has a pretty good tutorial online on how to do a coffee cup. so I looked at like every video made of coffee cups, to make sure that, just to update myself on what the thing is. So this will look similar to that. I want to just make sure that, that I didn't make it all up. I looked at his, and there's some things I do differently, but it's pretty close to his. But he works at Cinema, he's a friend of mine. so I just want to make sure that he gets his due there. So let me cut to this. Oops, that's not it. I had the wrong one. That's Keynote. All right. So here we are in Cinema 4D. And so this is basically our plane here. And you can see I can kind of move around here. And is that too dark? Is it really dark on your end? It's good. It's good. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create these are all primitives. These are all basic things it'll just make for you. These are the cylinders. So I'll make a cylinder here. So here's our cylinder. And we can just grab these little things and, I can make it wider here. I can also make it shorter if I'd like to, and I can move it up like that. I can grab this, I can grab onto this and just move it. That's straight up the axis, so that I can move along an axis there. So I'm just going to move it up to the ground there. And the cylinder by itself is a good start for a coffee mug, but it's not exactly what we need. We're going to turn off these height segments. I'll show you what that means. We'll go into shade this with lines. So that's what the actual segments are, and what I can do is I can create more segments. I can create less segments. In this case, we'll just create less for now. I can also change the number of segments that it takes to get around that cylinder. And I'm going to make it 14. And the reason that I'll make it 14 is, I was wondering why Rick did this. It's because if we look at it from above, if you see this axis here, it will perfectly bisect one of those axes if you do 14 rather than 16. And we're going to make it less anyway, so it won't be too much of a problem. And it'll create a nice width for our handle. So anyway, I make it there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this editable, and you hit a C key to make it editable. And what that does is it gets rid of all of the parameters. So when it's a primitive, it's a parameter. And then the next thing I have to do is I'm going to say, I want to select all of my polygons, and I'm going to hit Command A, and that selects them all. I'm right clicking. This is kind of a heads up menu, and just going down to optimize. Otherwise, a lot of these end up as separate pieces when the primitives are converted. So we'll do that there. So now we have this kind of set up here. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to slice along a loop. So I'm going to right click here and say I want it to do a loop path cut. And you'll see how this, well, actually, let me do something else first. I'm going to, hit escape. We'll go up here. There we go. The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually select all these polygons here. And I'm going to hit, I think it's the N key here. And I want to, the I key. There we go. I. And then I'm going to pull in like this. So this is just, I just want to inset this. And then I'm going to go look above here. I'm going to hit the D key. And that's going to be extrude. So I'm extruding this down. So now I built the volume of the cup there. So now it has some volume to it. And now the next thing I'm going to do is start adding a couple of loops to the outside here. So what I'll do is I will, there we go. And then I'm going to hit, again, this is what we call loop. Loops would go all the way around. So I can say, oh, I'd like to, add if I just grab on one of these lines, I'm going to add a loop, here. And this is cutting on the outside of that. These little loops here. Like that. So now I've built, and this is what I kind of want for my, to extrude out here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this. I'll hold down the Shift key and select that. So now I've selected these two polygons. I'm going to hit the D key again, and that'll just extrude them out like this. And I let go and just do it again, and it'll just do that extrude out again like that. So you'll see that there. But now I got to connect them. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, okay, now I no longer want to select. I want to select at the line level, and I'm going to grab onto this one, and I'm just going to pull it backwards like that. And then I'll grab onto the top one and the bottom one, and I'll pull it out just a little bit like this. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to select I have the plane selected here. I'm going to right click and do bridge. And this is going to be, I'm just going to grab this corner and pull it down, and it just bridges out there. And then I can now grab onto the loop cut again, and I'm going to just put one in here. Now this, when you put the loop cut, this is the percentage, which direction where that loop cut goes. So we can just put it right in the middle at 50 or so. And then I can grab this, and I'm going to say I want to go back to selecting lines. I'm going to double click on this one. So I select the whole line there, and I'll pull it out. Just whoops. Here, I'll just select the loop here. We'll just do loop selection. There we go. So I have that selected, and then I'm going to now hit the E key, which will let me pull this out like that. So now we have kind of something that kind of looks like a mug that's there. But what we need is it's not very smooth. This would be a very hard mug to hold. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab onto this here. This is called a subdivision surface. And if I drag this into the subdivision surface, it immediately rounds it. So basically what it does is if we pull this back out again, this becomes a cage. So this is it's basically creating rounds going. Basically, if you think about when you think about a Bezier curve, you have a point, and you have let's say what we would tend to call the teeter bars that are sticking out, and then you have another point, and then you have another the teeter bars that are sticking out like this. What's actually happening, they simplified this in a Bezier curve so that you could understand it, but there's actually you're building a cage with where it has to be tangent here and then it goes like this. And that's how when you build a curve, what Adobe did is took out this little line between the two teeter bars. But what you're actually doing is building a cage to build your curves in Illustrator. In the same way, that's what's happening here. It's saying, I'm going to calculate a curve, and I'm going to use these as guides. I'm going to kind of go towards them. And a lot of this is all based on, when you think of NURBS, non-universal rational B-splines, they come back, they still have weights, and weights we used to use for, ships to build big curves. So we pull them. That's why they're called weights. Anyway, so we will put it back in here. So now it's smooth. Now we can still select, we can still go in here and say, I want to select, I can select pieces on here where I can go, I can select that there. That's still, if I go back to the cylinder, I'm still grabbing onto the same cage that I might want to move here. But when I pull it, you'll see that it's pulling it, but it's calculating along that cage to make that work. Now we might want to go in here, for instance, and you'll notice here that this top edge is pretty harsh. And what we need is more geometry. We need more points to actually, go around it. So what we'll do is we can go in here and say, I want to do a loop path cut. And I can say, I'd like to cut one right there. You can see how and maybe I'll cut one right here. So now what it did is it just created more geometry for it to calculate along that. So now I have this little cup. So we'll leave this as it is right now. We might want to add, this is where I always forget where they put the stuff, is this, there we go. So now I can do it. I can add a material, and I can drag it onto this subdivision surface and say, I want, let's see here. I might want to make it red. Here, I'm not putting any type of green. I'm not putting any texture on it. So now that I have this here, let's try to export this out. This is where I have to go to the other window that you won't see. I'll pull this thing over here. So I'll say I want to export this out as a USDZ or USD. It says USDA or here. This is the USD settings here. So what you can see here is I have a USD export. USD is Universal Scene Description, something that Pixar came up with. And you want it to be set to binary or it won't work. And then you say zipped, which is USDZ. That's the Apple thing that's here. So now what we'll do is we will, interesting. Anyway, so we'll export those and bake the materials. We'll deal with more materials in another day. So now I'm going to export that out, and we'll save that to our desktop and just call it mug. And what we should have here, and the surfaces didn't export, but what you have here is the mug. This is the 3D mug here. Now, this is in preview, so I'm just looking at this big old mug in preview, and you can notice that there's still some geometry here. I could have probably made it smaller here, but I'm moving this around. And again, the things that I'm still working on related to this in USDZ, normally what I would do is take this and put it into Adobe Substance to really make the textures work. But I'm trying to figure out how in the new version of Cinema, there's a different way that I have to put the textures on, which I haven't perfected yet. But now that I have this here, I can go into preview and I can, let's see here, I gotta change my background. I'll change my background to white. And you'll see that this looks pretty dark. So this is maybe not the best example that I've ever done for this, but basically I have a 3D model. And the reason that I'm excited about this is because this is a 3D model that I can move around and figure out what angle I want. And this is something I built in Cinema relatively quickly. And I can figure out exactly what angle I want to put it in for my illustration, that's there. And so, and again, this is kind of a rough model, but if we go into something, I'll show you something Chris Fritchie did. Clarity.io. And, 1 second here. Just it's funny. Now, this is with a little bit more work. So what I showed you was something very quick. This is something that Chris Fritchie put together, I think. Let's see here. There we go. So this is once you spend a little more time on it. This is the clarity thing that Chris worked on here. But you can see that with more work, you can have something that has a lot more detail, stuck to it. And so now this is a 3D model. So if you want to do a presentation about it, you figure out exactly, where you want to position it. And again, I'm just looking at this in preview. Now I can literally just hit Command 4 and grab that image. And now if I open up and go to Keynote, if you look at this here, I'm going to drag this image in. Oops. That's the picture I took in preview. And then, of course, I can, now go into it and, sorry, I'm just a little, no, hold on. I was missing part of my, one screen's a lot bigger than the other one, so it's a little confusing there. So now I can go into this and go into my image, go into Insta Alpha, select all of this, boom, done. So that's the image. And I could do a series of those in preview. But one of the things that I'm trying to kind of we can kind of feel that we are very close to being able to, and if I want to do the mug, obviously the mug would be the same, same type of thing. Here's the mug. I'm going to, so there's no way to, right now, there is no good way to, this is a very rough thing, but I built that very fast. And that's why I think that people may want to think about learning how to model if you're a teacher, like basic stuff. And there are so many tutorials, whether it's Blender. Again, I'm using Cinema 4D because it's what I know somewhat. The Blender's free. You can download it. The thing that I'm trying to kind of get the USDZ thing working because I think that eventually we're going to be able to bring those models that we made back into Pages or to Keynote and just be able to rotate them around. And hopefully that kind of starts down the path of thinking about that process. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Okay, our first question for Keynote is from James Fosslin of Minneapolis. I laid out all the buttons and knobs for my synth in Keynote. I'm trying to figure out how to animate knobs to show position as a way to make tutorials. So many tutorials are hard to follow with hands over knobs.
Interesting. Well, I think that let's jump to this here. So let's take a look at. So if you have a knob, I think that let's see if we let's create this here, and let's create a little. What I'm interested in here is thinking about, I'm going to group this together, but I think the problem there is now, you see the problem is that's the, so I think.
Can't set an anchor point in it?
I'm trying to think about that. I have not tried to set an anchor. I'm interested in this because I'm not, again, this is kind of we're just taking questions and hacking through it. So we may. And people in the chat as well you guys read that if someone has a suggestion here. But I'm trying to think if there is a way to put an anchor point in there. What I'd probably do, the cheat that I would probably do here is I would hold down the Option key. I do that, right? I would do a copy. I'd lock them together, and then I'd hold the Option key down and make this one bigger. And then I would make this, this is how I would do it because I don't know an answer. I'd say no fill, no border. So if I let go of it, oh, it's still there. Interesting. It is drawing it without any reason to draw it. There's the line. I guess it won't let me make it completely. Because what I was going to say is I could make it, maybe make that part of the graphic, and just say, well, that's what it looks like. But if you do this, and then you set this little guy in here like this, inside of that circle, and then you select all of them, we should get back to the bounding box now is the same, right? Yeah. So there would be some way of creating that. Maybe if we make this, you'd have to figure out what I'm very fascinated by this problem with it's not being invisible. Maybe I give it a line, and then I go into the color. You get to watch me think in real time, which is always, then I just made it opacity a 0. So now you have a very ugly looking dial. Now now if you want to animate it, this is going to be, you click on animate here. You could probably, there's a bunch of different things you could do here, but you could have an action.
Click on action. Yeah,
and then
rotate.
go to rotate. So it kind of does something for you so that you can figure out what you want to do there. So that is, if we can preview it, it's now going to animate that direction, but you could have it be, the -45. That's interesting. Oh, it wants to be a certain, so clockwise, say 45 degrees, preview. There's your, and then you have it set to ease out, but that would be kind of nice. So, and if we click into this, anyway, so I think that would do the dial. If you want to animate it, I mean, obviously, I bet you your dials look way better than the dial I just did. But that, I think, will solve the dial. That's how you could build dials that you could animate, is using the animate action to make that work. And then, of course, you could have a build-in where it, you could have it pop. So you can have them all pop along the thing and then do the animation. So that could be another thing that you could make happen. And I believe that this can be, I think that everything in here can be Apple scripted. So you could script something that just does the thing that it needs to do, but I'm not 100% sure of how deep the Apple script stuff goes. I think it goes pretty deep in Keynote, but I'm not 100% sure about how deep you could take that. Let's go to the next question.
Craig McFarland from Boston, Massachusetts asks, how much do you use the rehearse slideshow feature? If so, what do you use it for?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So, not really answering the question because I've never used it, but I did want to make an observation about rehearsing and what I do when I rehearse, and this may work with this feature, is I rehearse until in my mind I always know what the next chart or thing I want to do. So until I can do the whole deck almost from memory, I'm not ready. So if you know what the next chart is, you can transition into it. And so I'd do anything I could to get myself there.
Yeah, the thing that I'm really particular about is that I, for me, that I don't want to show you anything that I'm not talking about on my slide deck. So my rehearsal is constantly working the slide deck. I'm constantly jumping out of the back in, out, back in, back, out, back in. I go up to what I typically do is I go, oh, that word shouldn't be there, or this was just this came in a little too slow. Like I'll sit there and go, the appear took a little too long, or the pop didn't feel exactly the way I wanted it, or when it swings over, I want it to bounce a little bit more, or I want this to come over and be softer. It's really how I feel about it. Like I want this to fade in really nicely and this to fade out. I use Magic Move a lot. So I have things moving, like you have a group of things, and now they're going to swing over here, and now they're going to go over here, and it makes it really powerful to kind of go down that path. So I rehearse a lot. I don't use rehearse slide. I don't even know what, I'll be honest with you, I don't even know what rehearse slideshow is. Like I don't know what that is. I just run slideshow until I on my system until I rehearsed it. I have to look at what rehearse slideshow is. Where is it? Sorry, I'm learning something with all of you here because. Yeah, it just, to me, rehearse slideshow looks like slideshow. So I don't know what is different about rehearse slideshow. I'm just looking for the about.
So I think what it does is it lets you run the slideshow, and when you hit the space bar, as you're naturally ready to switch slides, it records that timing.
It looks like what it actually does. No, that's a record, and I've used that. It looks like it just doesn't require an external display. It'll show you I know what it is. Okay, now it's not a bad idea. It lets you rehearse the slideshow looking at the second screen for the speaker without having an external display. Usually, if you just hit slideshow and you don't have a second display, it will never show you the second screen. It'll always show you the main screen. So it's pretty good. So anyway, so the answer is not much, because I have all the screens that I'm going to use, because almost all of my PowerPoint presentations in the last 2 years have been over Zoom. So it's going into the exact system it's going to use later. Next question.
Guy Cochran from Seattle is asking, is there a fast way to create 20 slides for 20 images?
Go to Roscoe.
Yeah, just grab the images and drag them to the thumbnails area, and it'll create a separate slide for each image that you drag into there. So if you just have a folder full of images, you drag them into that left hand. And what you can do is, like, the first thing you might want to do is make the first slide the exact size you want it to be, because I think it'll follow that through all those imports that you just do through the thumbnail section.
I think that it will, if it's less than 1920 by 10, let's say you have a 1920 by 1080. If it's less than 1920 by 8, it'll just center it, in the screen. I don't think it will zoom up. If it's larger than 1920 by 1080, the problem really is that it will fit it to the screen, which means you get, it doesn't just, I would love to have an option, and maybe there is one that I don't know about, that I could hold down an option and say fit to width, or fit to width would be the one that I really want, so that it just scales them all up as that goes through and just cuts off the top and bottom as it goes through, so they're all 16 by 9.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward process. So you could probably just quickly iterative do exactly what Alex just said. Make a larger one, make a smaller one, and see how your photos import.
Yeah, but I bring on a lot of them that way, where I just grab them and drag them into the thumbnails, and it just goes all down. But then I have to go through them all and just scale them all up, because they all have a pillar usually. Next question.
Andrew Dali from Berlin is asking, how many sources can you bring into Keynote by USB capture on an M1 Pro MacBook?
The most I've brought in so far, and it was just a limit of how many connectors I had, was 4. I don't think that there's any hard limit to it. I think it's I've definitely brought in 4. I can't do it right now, but I brought in 4 USB connections into my Mac Mini. I haven't tried the big one. I potentially could put 6 into this studio, but yeah, it doesn't seem to be any. There doesn't seem to be a hard limit to it, and they all seem to perform just fine. So it's kind of an amazing. You really can build like a little multi camera setup, with webcams using Keynote. And I think that, again, as we talk about this for educators, and maybe we should we did this in the past, so I didn't want to make it the center of what we're doing, but maybe we do another Keynote one where we talk about what we've learned with live video, to like live video into Keynote and play with more presentations. I think for teachers, again, even if you're in the classroom, it's powerful, because you now have you could have basically a whole bunch of cameras, one close up on a frog or something happening, some kind of chemical reaction or some object that you want to show, one on the, one in a whole bunch of different places, and potentially one on the teacher if you're doing a hybrid, and be able to cut between those, as you go through the presentation. But you can go back and look at some of our older ones for some examples of that. Next question.
Chad Lafarge from Columbia, Missouri is asking, what virtual webcam options exist to pull video into Keynote on a Mac Mini M1?
I think that virtual cameras and outputs are the biggest missing point for the Keynote right now. So, that part I don't think has been really solved. I think we saw somebody hack it. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, this isn't really virtual, but the one thing that I didn't know right away is that you can plug a lightning connector into a phone and the video on the phone will show up if you plug it into your Mac.
Yes. Yeah. The phone will show up, and we've definitely tested that. And that has been, really, really powerful. I'm trying to see if we were just, I thought that there was a, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, there's somebody who has figured out a way to hack a input into it, and I just can't find the reference to it right now. Next question.
Guy Cochran from Seattle's back. Any recommended resources for Keynote templates?
I think that, go ahead, John.
I use Envato for everything. Keynote templates, After Effects templates. I've been a member there for eons. It's a fantastic site.
Yeah, and I use the one that I probably use the most if I'm not building one is Keynotopia. Keynotopia is one that I've used for a long time as well. Next question.
Chris Taylor from Carlsbad, California is asking, Alex, can you show how you begin a Keynote presentation? Choosing slide, background, fonts, style, etc. Layout of the text, size, bullet points, etc.
So the way that I don't look at any of those things when I get started. So the very first thing that I do is I start in Notes. So I open up Apple Notes because it's available on all my computers and my mobile devices and everything else. And I make an outline. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this. I've learned, here's the biggest challenge that you have building any presentation, whether it's Keynote or other things, is losing the thread, losing the narrative of what you're trying to actually talk about. Because it's so easy to get into. Now I'm going to pick a font. Now I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to do that. So I get away from that pretty quickly, and I make sure that I'm just thinking through my thought process. Now I may change that, but I want to start with an outline. And I have to admit, because I'm so ADD, I start everything with outlines. I don't do anything. I don't ever just start writing. For the most part, I always have outlines that I start, and they're very, very terse because I don't want to start writing anything. Anyway, then I go into my iPad and I draw a picture for everything on my outline. So and it's really bad looking. I might even have some. Let me see if I can find one. It's not pretty. It's almost as fast as I can just jot out an idea. It only has to have enough detail for me to remember what it was. I don't know if I have. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have anything I can show that would do that. But anyway, so I just draw it out. I'm going to have a picture of this. I'm going to do this. Then I save that. And of course, it saves to the cloud. I open it in Keynote on my computer, and then that's when I start to work on it. As far as the backgrounds, for a long time, I've done white backgrounds, and that was because people were printing the slides. And so black backgrounds, if you ever printed a black Keynote slide, it comes out and the paper is wet because you used so much ink on the paper. And so I noticed it a couple of times of how these dark color or any color background would print out. So if I think someone's going to print it out, I still do it over white. Otherwise, I do my Keynotes over black or some dark. I've kind of come to like this kind of dark gray gradient as a background that I use for things that I've seen in a couple of places. And so I use that a lot. And so that, I think it looks nice. I think it's a lot easier in a dark room, if you're doing a presentation or over Zoom. I think the dark looks better. So anyway, so that's what I do there. As far as text size, it's mostly pretty big because unless I think sometimes I still build Keynotes to print, like people want to have a document in Keynote form. But the vast majority of the time, I rarely have more than 20 words, oftentimes less than 10 words on a slide. If I'm going to present against it, I won't have the minimum number of words. People are reading or they're listening. They're not doing both at the same time. So I try to keep my amount of text to a brutal minimum, to make sure that I can keep talking and people are going to listen to what I'm saying. Other than because it's part why everyone goes to sleep when you're doing a presentation. Roscoe.
Do you ever allow the size of the screen or the resolution of the screen and the distance the audience is from you actually help determine any of your fonts or how you set up your screens?
Not really, because you can usually read my screen at 640 by 360. Like you could, there's not any, I do think about it. I think about screen size when I am, if I'm showing some kind of technical document, like, so if I'm doing a screen capture of a CAD document, you do have to think about like, how is that graphic going to look? But usually my slide decks are so simple graphically that they would fit, you can look at it on an iPhone or you could look at it on a big screen and they don't change dramatically, in that area because there just shouldn't be that much to read. I never use serif fonts, pretty much ever, but like ever, never, ever on anything. I can't. Here's the thing that I found is that I have a form of dyslexia that my brain can see white space at the same value as the letters. And so what I see is patterns, and it took me years to figure this out. And I actually, when I say years, I mean, like literally I've just become conscious to it in the last couple of weeks. I think I posted to Twitter was when I realized it, is that I realized I read so much and I was like, oh, I read all the time. So how am I dyslexic? But I never read books ever. Like I never read any books. And I realized I very rarely read serif fonts because I have a hard time. I fall asleep. That's what happens. And it's very slow. I mean, like when I say fall asleep in like 15 minutes, like I can't read more than 15 minutes. And because it takes so much brain power for me for my brain to process it. Anyway, I suddenly realized literally like a week ago or 2 weeks ago that it's the serif fonts that are the problem for me. Like it creates a structure that my brain latches onto. And then that's what's causing all the processing issues. And that's why I read so much online and so little in paper is because everything's in serif. And I also realized that I had this kind of emotional upset every time I see someone build a presentation with serif fonts. Serif fonts are just to make sure that people were watching, it's when you have a little lip at the bottom and it goes up, Times Roman is a classic serif font. So these little serifs, the little bottoms of the pillars on there is the thing that I don't use. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Now we know what your kryptonite is, and
It is. It's totally. Just send me stuff, and if you just want me to sign a contract, send it in serif, and I'll be like, oh yeah, whatever. I'm not going to read this. Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Mine's whispering. So sorry, Roscoe. And I was going to ask real quick. That's
really
thank
sorry
you
about that.
What is your favorite font to use?
So the funny thing is, I change my fonts a lot. So I don't have I like Avenir. I think no, I don't think is it Avenir? Hold on.
Know it well.
Yeah. So, client. What happens is I end up with so many different fonts for client projects that I have these long lists of fonts and I think through them. I will admit that Myriad is one that I like a lot. I still build a lot of stuff in Helvetica. I think Helvetica is a nice, strong. We wouldn't use it for a long time, and then I watched the documentary on it, and I was like, oh, it's I kind of came back to it. Helvetica New is one that I use, a fair bit. Avenir.
That's an illegal font, by the way. Helvetica New.
It's illegal.
Yes, it's illegal. It's not a real PostScript font.
Oh, it's an Apple font, I think. I'm trying to think. I'm looking. Papyrus. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. If anyone sees Papyrus if anyone's seen the Saturday Night Live thing on Papyrus, you just have to you have to see it. Roscoe.
Cheeseburger. Oh, sorry. Cambria is my favorite font. I know you were going to ask me, Mitchell. So because my daughter's name is Cambria.
There you go.
So that part of when you're talking, we watch these Apple keynotes and they have a huge rear LED wall behind them. Would you ever use Keynote to power something like that? And how would that go?
You absolutely could, because the processing for that, it won't be any higher than 4K. And then what'll happen is that you'll up-res it, because those images don't need to be any higher res than that. So it'd be up-res to go across that, and I don't think you'd see any difference in that area. I don't think that they're using Keynote for that at this point. I think that they designed it to look like Keynote, but I don't think that that's I don't know. I don't know for sure, but it doesn't. I don't see. It looks to me. It looks like it looks like Keynote, but I don't think it actually is Keynote at that point. It'd be hard to cue. Like to cue to what they want. As a video person, I would animate it. At that point, if I know that it's going to be pre-done that way. But I think that for a long time it was. I mean, Keynote was definitely what they were using for those. But I think that with the new M1, I will say Keynote is extremely snappy. We had issues with big images coming across things and stuttering a little bit. And I don't see that anymore. It definitely is. I mean, when I say issues recently, the 2020 Macs, if you had a big image that was forcing the GPU to change everything at the same time, you'd see framing, and I don't see that on the M1s. It's pretty powerful. But yeah, it should be able to power it up to 4K easily. And if you need something that has more detail than 4K, again, you have to think about what you're putting up there. Because even Apple, I think those are designed for a 1080p screen because nobody's looking at it on the screen. Like everyone's watching a 1080p stream of the Keynote on their home computer. So you don't really have to design for more than that. Next question.
Graham Cardwell from Belfast, Northern Ireland is asking, I grew up with Windows and PowerPoint, but the eureka moment that moved me to Keynote was exporting an alpha channel. What other killer features make Keynote the bee's knees for video streaming, etc.?
We talked about this a little bit in the past, but the things for me is, number one is I find that the kerning is better. So the distance between, if we cut to this here, it seems like a little thing. Let me see if I get the right monitor. The distance between the text. So there's a couple things. One is the difference between here is the kerning, as well as the anti-aliasing along the edges, I think is better on Keynote than it is on anything else, on any other presentation tool. And I'd have to go back and we'd have to put some words in here and look at them the way Keynote does it and the way PowerPoint does it. But I think that's a big thing. The transitions, the magic move, the transitions, the Insta Alpha, these are all things that I am very attached to. And now I will say that the video inside of Keynote, I'm not using it here, but the video inside, being able to have live video inside of Keynote is profoundly cool. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, as a former Chiron operator, that kerning thing, it's just like you're instantly go to it, and the fact that it's so much easier to do it in Keynote. But if you've ever
it's not just that it's easier. It's not just that it's easier. It's naturally better. Like it is the rules that they're using for the spacing of letters and the anti-aliasing is better than.
The font hinting? Do they call it hinting?
Well, it's just I think that it looks more natural. Roscoe.
Yeah, I was just going to say all the animation. I mean, at the end of the day, video should be about motion, and motion attracts the attention of an audience. So I think I haven't used PowerPoint for a while, but there's nothing close to the animation tools and the magic moves that are in Keynote.
Yeah, absolutely. No, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back, and he says, I tried to follow the brief Cinema 4D tutorial, but it went too quickly for me. What resources would you recommend?
Yeah, so I would recommend just search what you want to do, like search coffee mug in YouTube, and you'll see like 8 different tutorials on how to do it, and they'll probably be better than what I just showed. Rick Barrett is the one that I kind of looked at and said, oh, I'm going to mostly do what Rick's doing on that. So you'll find that his tutorial is, I was going to do a tutorial on the coffee mug and put it on YouTube on our channel. And then I looked at Rick's and I was like, well, I would just do what Rick's doing. So he's got a second one on texture mapping it as well. And that's from Cineversity. You can sign up for Cineversity as well from Cinema 4D, and then there's just hours and hours and hours of content. But you'll find a lot on YouTube. It's a pretty deep resource when it comes to that. That's how I learn anything I want to learn in Cinema 4D. Generally, is either Cineversity or I just search it on YouTube. So those are my two resources. Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Weisberg, Germany. I did the first presentation with Keynote and live camera view. Worked pretty fine. How could a presentation with more than one camera, aka speaker, be done when they are located in different places? For example, to do a live pitch or project.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, this is something we keep kind of asking Zoom for, is get the ISO, so we can get the ISO in one program. But two computers or one computer with multiple Zoom instances or Zoom rooms, and you can get two HDMI feeds, put them into an ATEM Mini. ATEM Mini looks like a webcam to the Mac, so you plug it in via the USB back into the Mac, and then you can switch those feeds on the live feed.
Yeah, and assuming that you're not, all of those could show up as different web cameras. So assuming that you, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm going to give you the kind of the heavy iron, not the heaviest iron version, but the heavier iron version, is that you could have a Mini with a, I'm just trying to think about this. Yeah, you could totally have a Mac Mini with a Sonnet box with a, SDI outs, 4 SDI outs on a deck link going into 4 web, I know this will sound crazy, but 4 web presenters. And you may be able to pass those. You may be able to pass. There's an NDI. I know that we saw something where it's NDI to USB, so it shows up like a web. That was, who makes that? I thought I ordered one already, but I haven't gotten it yet. But the NDI. It sees NDI and turns it into a web camera, but you could have 4 of those theoretically, because it's just as many physical inputs as you have into the computer. It can see them and make them an input. I haven't tried using like deck links to see if it will actually see an SDI input as opposed to HD, but it has seen pretty much everything I put into it. And I know that it does see the Blackmagic switcher. So Roscoe's, you just push everything into the switcher and switch to each person. But if you want to have 4 different people across the bottom while you're doing the pitch, building your own little super source, so to speak, then you would need to, and you could have them over Zoom, and then you'd have ISO out of them and then pump them back in. You'd probably have to figure out audio delays in that big mess. But you would, I think that would work, is to have an ISO, Zoom ISO to push them out one way or the other, either HDMIs or SDIs, then bring them back into a series of digitizers, probably on another computer. But you could then have 4 inputs that are there, and they could be over Zoom, and they could be all talking to you in that presentation, which would be, it's so cool in my head that I think that we have to try to build it. Like just thinking about that question, I'm like, oh, that'd be pretty nifty. Anyway, we'll think through that. Next question.
Fred Eric Eppert from Broad Arbor, Germany. When you output a Keynote presentation to Zoom, not with the shared screen feature, but with HDMI output of the Mac to an ATEM, and you use a live video feature inside Keynote, you end up with the audio being out of sync. Any workaround?
You have to have an audio for anything like you're going to do here. You do need to have an audio delay somewhere. You have to have the ability to add audio delay, and that can be in your audio input. It could be in you can do audio delay also in not in loopback, but in audio hijack. There's an audio delay unit that you can put in, but you will have to do that. And one of the things that I've been trying to figure out is whether I can change audio delay programmatically based on what input I'm jumping to. So, and the reason for that is so that if I cut to my Keynote, it automatically changes the delay, because sync is an issue. Inside of with my system, sync is definitely an issue. You could, if your video is being embedded into it, it might work. But I have definitely had a problem with you're losing a bunch of frames of video, so your audio is ahead. So you need to further delay it. What I've done is, in the transition of me switching over, I change my delay by hand. I just know where I need to go, and I change it, which is it's a very clunky way to do that. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, since you are going into an ATEM, and if you can get it to line level, those audio inputs on the ATEM can be delayed up to 6 frames, I believe it is, if that helps. But I'm not sure that'll get you there.
Yeah, you may need, but again, audio hijack could do it. It's just a matter of figuring out a workflow that would make that work. Next question.
Craig McFarland from Boston, Massachusetts. Is there a way to set an included web video to mute? I want to speak to what is in the video, but not have to remember to mute it.
So what I would say, I don't know if there's a way to, let's see. So I think what you're talking about here is you want to, there is a, web video, and then you're going to post a URL. So let's see here. I'll do this on the screen. Hold on. So we are going to cut to that. All right. So if we go up to media here and we go to web video, and it's going to ask us for a URL. So I'm going to just go find something on YouTube real quickly. So we'll use my favorite test, which is lo-fi hip hop radio, which is what we all use for these tests. And so now I want to paste that in. So there it is. We'll insert it there. So now you want to talk over it. It's selected. It's interesting. You don't get a lot of choices there. Yeah, I don't know. I don't unless someone else has an answer. I don't think that there's. I don't see it. I don't. And I will say that I never. The reason I don't know anything about web video is I never use it. I use a program called Downy. If someone gives me a video that says, "Hey, can I put this in my presentation?" The first thing that I do is download it. Like I just go up to Downy, I drop the URL in, and it will Downy 4 will just download anything that's on almost any video on the web. It'll download, and it'll, and so I just pull it down, and then I put it into the presentation. And I know I'm probably breaking some terms of service or whatever, but depending on your internet connection to play back a video is not something that I'm super excited about. So, and you do have more controls in the video playback if you just pull the file down. It's not a very expensive app, and it's worth every penny. Next question.
Mitchell Hill from Wilmington, Delaware asks, is keyframing available? I'm so hooked on the After Effects graphical user interface.
Yeah, it's not. The keyframing is available. It's not going to be like After Effects. It's a different way of approaching it. So if we did it, we started doing a keyframe here. Let's see if I can grab this. You can see that there's a keyframe there. So you're adding actions. So if I want to grab this and do an action, let's say. Add another action here, and I'll say I want to move it. It just moves over here. And now, so now you can animate it, and you can start building. We did this in an earlier one, but you can, I've not done that way. So this is here, and if we preview that, so it's got this little bit here, and then we just add another, you're adding actions to it. So you're just going, I want to move, then I want to go over like this. Now I can, figure this out. I don't know if I can align to that, but you're going to end up kind of playing with it. So it's not designed to be, After Effects. So,
but the easing appears to be automatic, which is nice if you want that.
Yeah, the easing's there, and you can play with it here. So you can, like I can go back to my build order. There we go, group. So this is where your build order is, and where you're gonna start adding these. And I can go in here, and you can see that I can kind of pull this up. You can keep on adding. It's doing a lot of the work, for you. So the second one that I made was a little haphazard. So I could go in here and say, I just want to get rid of that. And then I can pull this over here. I can, grab.
And that's very much like After Effects, because you've got the Bezier curves in there that you can mess with.
It is. It's just that you don't have a lot of, teeter bars or any other control. This is not really a Bezier curve. It's a B-spline that allows you to make that work. And so it's, but yeah, so then if we preview it, and then now you could, So, you can start to build these. And if you want to stop somewhere, you'd have to build another action. So, I mean, you're doing it. It's not, I don't know, it's not a traditional way to do that, but you definitely can animate things going through there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, they had me at instant alpha.
But yeah, so there are animation tools that are available, and that's relatively new. Next question.
Next question is from me. Do you need to purchase copyrights to use certain fonts?
You should. Do you have to? There's a lot of fonts that float around. They're not really protected. There's not really a copyright for them. But proper, especially if you're going to send them out somewhere. It's one of the reasons that I don't get excited about using. I don't use a lot of creative fonts. I use fonts mostly that come with the system, because I also don't want to get into a system, open it in a new app, new computer, and then not have the font. So generally, that's why I live in Helvetica most of the time, is just that it's one that I know is going to be on every computer that I try to open it on. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, an easy bet is Google fonts. They're good.
Yeah, the Google fonts are pretty good too. Yeah, again, the kerning is a little weird. Next question.
Morgan Price from Victoria, British Columbia asks, any recommendations and wisdom from the panel to use Keynote to create short educational Instagram or other social posts?
I think that if you look at a lot of these, what we're doing here, you can create a lot of really cool transitions that zing from one thing to the next. So I would, really think about doing voiceovers and show stuff, or even just little things that are that have just movement. But the nice thing about Keynote is it's the easiest app in the world to just have some quick transitions. Push throughs are really, useful when you're pushing from one slide to the other and it just kind of fades out. But it gives you the ability to edit something really quickly. It's someone should put that in the second hour discussion. That would be a fun, one to do on a Saturday of we've been kind of just doing these general Q&As, but maybe we think about projects that you'd like to do inside of Keynote or other things. And we'll play with that. Next question.
John Snyder from Reno, Nevada asks, when creating a series of limited slides and transitions in Keynote, does the application stop momentarily between slides, or will 5 times slides together look seamless?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
That's totally, you can control that behavior on any object, or pretty much anything you put into Keynote. You can say, do it on a click, or do it behind. There's a sequence. I want you to wait until this one's done, then do the next one. Or you can say, do it concurrently. Yeah. So those are just settings you can put on pretty much any animation object in Keynote.
Yeah. The one of the things, if we cut to this here, you can see here, if I drag this up to this one, the two of them will link together. And then if let's see if I pull this up here, I can say after build. So I want to do this one after this one, or I can say I want to do it with it, but I want to delay it by 1/10 of a second. So it comes in a little bit after that one. I have no idea what this would do. Let's see. Yeah, it's very confusing about how that would work. Anyway, so, but you can, connect those together there that way. And that's kind of how you set that up. Next question.
Tony Mobley from Newman, Georgia, here on the panel. What is the cost of Cinema 4D?
It is, go ahead, Mitchell.
No, it's quite all right. It's mostly a subscription now, and I think it's very close to $1,000, unless you're an educational person. If you want to dabble in it and you have After Effects, it's free as the light version.
Yeah, the educator version, I think, is $9 every 6 months. So it's a pretty, if you're an educator, Cinema 4D is very affordable for the whole thing. I think that's the whole Red One subscription. I mean, so they're very aggressive about supporting educators or students. But I think this professional one is, I want to say $100 a month or something like that, close to what Mitchell said. Next question.
John Snyder's back, and he has another question. I was trying to replicate a PowerPoint technique in Keynote that uses Magic Move to change the crop mask on an item over 2 slides. I wanted to crop picture to move within the crop frame. Keynote dissolved the changes. Any suggestions?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
I'm thinking the standard picture frame, if you actually make that a separate object, then you might be able to just animate it along with whatever the image is behind it you're trying to move. And therefore, within that frame, you could certainly animate other objects. And can I do one quick pickup on a previous question?
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody asked about if you could animate audio or Magic Move audio, and it actually does. If you had a video, I did it with an embedded video, not with a web video. But if you actually have a video in a Keynote and you duplicate that slide, and then do a Magic Move between them, the audio level will change as that slide transitions.
Oh, that's cool. What I was trying to think about here is that if we did, I think that we talked about this on another. Somewhere in here, I believe that there is a Boolean function that we it's too much for that. I thought we had I could have sworn that I saw it was like someone brought this up, and there is a way, because I think what
subtract one image from another.
Yeah, I'm trying to subtract one from the other, and let's look at our chat too while I'm working on this, see if someone else like throws it out there. But I'm almost certain that you can add and subtract, but I can't remember where I saw that. All right, sorry, it's around here somewhere. But I'm pretty sure that you can do a Boolean function in there, and then you could cut to do what Roscoe's talking about. You cut a hole out of it, then you could scale that whole thing up and over, and you would change a different place, and it would do it with a magic move, or you could just animate it at that point. Next question.
Mark Giuliani's back. If you added lighting to the coffee mug earlier, would the shadows and shading be available in Preview or Keynote?
Ooh. I got to figure that out. Like this is a brand new version, and I got to figure out. I think that you have to use certain kinds of materials and lighting to make that work, but I believe that you can do that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back. What use cases could you see a Keynote OSC to Keynote bridge being useful for?
Just doing complex animation. I think that being able to build lots of complex things that are tied into a larger presentation, where you can control, how the audio comes up and be able to control lighting, in the room. All these other things could be done if you had that working. Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, a tool we use all the time, QLab, and being able to drive things off QLab for like a show would be amazing if you could, talk to Keynote and have it do all kinds of fancy things.
Next question.
Next question is from Tony Mobley here on the panel with us. Is there a use case for Keynote and Canva?
Not that I know of. So I think if you're a heavy Keynote user, Canva wouldn't necessarily fit into your pipeline. Next question.
And it looks like our last question from Douglas Carmichael. Can you synchronize audio to changes in your scene in Cinema 4D?
Cinema 4D actually has some fairly good audio tools in there, so you can get the audio in there, playing it out, and then animate things to that audio. Absolutely. All right, I think that we have made it through the our little thing. So if you have suggestions and things you'd like us to cover with Keynote, and we would. A lot of times if I'm doing a demo at the very beginning, it's because there's no questions. So if you ask a bunch of questions, we'll just jump right into the questions. I'll be honest, I didn't plan to do that demo for the coffee mug. I just did it because there were 2 questions. It was going to be a really short hour. And then we run out. Now we're running long for our poor educators. So we're going to say goodbye to YouTube. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. And now we will invite our educators in. Steve's already made it. I don't know if we have a lot of other educators planning to jump in today, but if we can bring those folks in. Here we go. We've got a couple people raising their hand here. And I'm going to, while we bring them in and do a mic check, I'm going to step away for about, we're starting a little late, so I'm going to cut it a little short. So let's start back up at 9:15, and we'll jump into the questions. So I'll be right back.
Tony, I'm going to go. Can you pick up reading, please?
Erin's here, so she's going to do it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Erin's
am I
the
reading
host.
questions or am I the host?